Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Andrew and Sharon. Hi, Sharon. How you doing?
Morning. Happy Monday.
Yeah, back at you. We're back after a 2-week break. I think we both took the holiday, and then I really enjoyed the holiday so much that I took another holiday in Dublin. So, yes, that was good. But what a crazy time it's been in, the whole spate of suicides over this last, it just feels like there's, one after the other. And, Kate Spade and, of course, Anthony Bourdain, which was just, shocking, and the outpouring of love that's coming in. Mm-hmm. What's going on, Sharon? And is it, I mean, you've dealt with this personally. You've written books on it. I mean, I'm fascinated by your perspective as to what's happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming in so many ways. And I think back to my friend Joy dying, which has been 8 years now. And since she died, I mean, it's just been a wave of suicides. And I think there's a variety of reasons. And if I'm not a therapist, I'm a grief educator, but if you look at, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and some of those other suicide prevention sites, I mean, they talk about there really is no one reason. And I think people are just feeling down. I mean, I can only imagine that some of the negativity in our current political environment doesn't help,
Right.
But also the kind of help that's available, and maybe the fact that we're still a society that has such a stigma around talking about your problems that people hold it in to the point that they're in so much pain they just can't deal with it anymore. And I think that has a lot to do with it, especially here. I always say this, here in LA, here in Hollywood. We live in a world where there's always this facade that people put on. And I think, maybe they get to the point where the issues they're dealing with on a mental health perspective so outweigh their ability to deal with them that this is the choice that they make. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to think that that's what they do, but that's the reality.
When you look at I was looking at some stats. Suicide rate is up 25-30% over the last decade. I mean, I don't think it was quite that bad, and of course they said that covered the the economic crash, the recession. But I don't know. I mean, just the pressures of living seem to be intensifying and magnifying.
Well, yeah, and when you look at the age range of people who are, the highest percentage of people who are dying by suicide, it's the middle-aged folks, right? Like 50 to 60 in that age range. And both my best friend Joy and my former fiance John were in that age range. I mean, Anthony Bourdain is in that age range. And, it's that's my age range. And so, it's kind of a scary statistic because sometimes people think, well, it's the young kids, and it's not. It's the older kids, the older generation. And I think after the 50s and 60s, the next one past that is those people who are over 75, because they're facing their mortality and they're in pain and they can't pay for their medical insurance, whatever the reasons are. And it's like, it's the older generation that's really struggling with this. And again, I think it's because we were brought up not to talk about our problems, not to get help, that if you go get help, you're weak, right?
Right. And you and I have touched on this, the stigma around that, particularly for guys, is that you're perceived weak if you can't deal with things. It's it's bizarre because, as again, we start this discussion from the music to grieve to. This is the page we're on, and it's the idea that music can help you grieve. But if I look at some of the themes that we've covered, there's a lot of grief in this depression state, area. There's a lot of grief in, mental health. That unresolved grief just kind of magnifies it. And you wonder of a Scott Hutchison, you wonder of an Anthony Bourdain, that they fight this thing and they're not dealing with it, and it ultimately manifests in themselves killing themselves. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I think you're right on the mark with that. I mean, I believe, probably because I do the grief recovery method work, is that a lot of the underlying issues we have go back to the fact that we haven't been taught well to deal with loss. And so when a loss does occur, whether it's death or a job or a breakup, as we've said, moving, whatever it is, we don't have the coping skills. And so to me, I mean, educating people, making this part of the curriculum, in schools, teaching kids it's okay not to be on, the championship team. It's okay to, so that when these things do happen, they don't seem so overwhelming. Now, again, that's not the only answer. It's just one answer in talking about unresolved grief. But I think people have so many unresolved issues that they haven't dealt with, that it just pushes them to the point where, they just can't take the pain that's associated with that anymore.
Does it help, the cathartic, the cry? I mean, you and I, again, have touched on this. Is that a technique that you use with the people to create an environment where they can just get it out?
I think so. I mean, your body was given eyes that cry for a reason. They can be happy tears. They can be sad tears. I think whatever way you can release the energy of grief or loss that you hold in your body, and that's what we do, is when we don't talk about it, whether it's grief or anxiety or whatever, when you hold it in, it starts to manifest in your body. And I always tell people to create a safe space where you can allow your body to weep, as important as it is to cry, but to allow your body to actually weep, which is a little bit beyond just crying. And when you have that, that sort of racking sobs, you really are getting that out of yourself. So you're not holding on to it, because the more you hold on to it, the more you get to the point where you feel like that, that teapot that's boiling, that's about to explode. So yeah, getting out through tears, listening to music. Now, for some people, listening to music doesn't, I don't know. For me, when my best friend and John died, I put on the saddest music I could think of, and I cried for, I don't even know how many months, maybe years. And I played that music to help those tears to come out, because I knew that I had to let it go. And the music was a lifesaver for me when I was walking.
Yeah, it's two things. There's the track for this week is this amazing track by Chloe, I think Carodi, and it's called Variations on an Epitaph. And she wrote it because a young lad, from a family she knew and loved, died, and just the stunned shock that she went away, and she said locked herself in a room for 2 days and wrote it. But it's this piece for piano and strings, piano and violin, and it's just that emotional roller coaster. You start off here, and then it builds and it builds, and I found myself yesterday, I was writing the write-up, and you find yourself in that emotion, and I'm bloody crying as I write this thing, and and internally I'm going, excellent, Andrew, you'll be able to cope with the next loss much better. But it's that allowing yourself to let this music make you feel sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I know, at some point you reach saturation, maybe. I know for me, I listened to the sad music to the point where it's like I felt like I had cried myself out. And then I would walk with no music because I needed to kind of clear my head. So I think, for some people, listening to the sad music in the beginning might be too much, and maybe they need the silence. But then they're able to listen to the sad music, or even the happy music, the music that brings them positive memories, which also can evoke emotions, that make them cry. So, I think everybody's different. But in my case, the sad music right away came into play. And even after my dad died, we put it on Frank Sinatra, we put on the memorial music, we put it all on, we played it and played it and played it and just cried with it,
There's that, and this is a conversation that we've been having, elsewhere in the music too, about the intentionality of, you do this a lot in your work. If one sets an intention, there is such a power to that. But the idea of setting an intention of using music in a certain way, because there are times, you know, coming out of a broken relationship or a divorce, the songs that would kill me were the happy love songs, you know?
Exactly.
the ones where the singer's talking about, you know, how amazing falling in love with and how amazing the future's going to be, because you get that reverse effect, don't you? Where you're like, shit, that's what I had and that's what I was going to have. And again, it brings you into that place of grief where you sit and cry when you're listening to something happy, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you pull out all the songs that were your love songs when you were dating or married to somebody, and you listen to them, and instead of, like you said, those evoking those emotions of joy and all of that, it evokes emotions of sadness and loss. And, so I think everybody's different in what works for them. Sometimes the memories are too painful, so they don't want to hear that music, but they still want to listen to something, right? And so they can pick up songs like the ones that you're going to put on, for this week, or, the Musicto Grieve playlist, that may not have all of those memories associated with it, but still have the beautiful melodies and words that evoke that sadness that needs to come out. You just can't hold it in.
And there are other aspects as well. The song of the month on the track of the month for the Grieve list is from a lovely Irish singer-songwriter called Robb Murphy. And he has this track, Sleep Tonight. And it had already appeared on the list because it had resonated with me many months ago. But they have just re-recorded it with the Ulster strings. And they've put this amazing video on it. And the essence of this song was he lost his mother to mental health issues. And the video depicts the isolation and the loneliness of somebody dealing with depression as they go out into the world and come back and you can't sleep, whatever. But there's that empowerment aspect. There's, if you're talking to somebody, they're working with the Belfast Samaritans. There is somebody there that if you do talk about this, you do bring this out into the open, that, in the words of, Robb's song, and then maybe you do get to sleep tonight. And it's, again, part of the purpose of the list and doing what you and I are doing now is to have the discussion, is to throw it out there so that people do come along, they can go, I'm not alone. I mean, that's a huge issue with grief as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think, being able to recognize it is a big issue, and then to understand it and find the support that you need from other people. And I think that's the big thing, is finding support. And I think because people don't know what to do, again, whether it's grief or whether it's depression or whatever, they tend to pull away. And that's when folks who are going through a tough time really need somebody the most, right? Is when you're going through that, but yet you turn around and all your friends are kind of like, they've got something going on and I don't want to deal with it. And so, maybe music becomes your best friend, during that time, or, you have to find ways to be able to talk to somebody, regardless, like the Samaritans, for sure, definitely, as a crisis organization, to just talk through it so that you do feel better and you find that hope again so that you can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we will paste in it's the suicide line, and that's probably not the right word for it. And for the Samaritans in the UK underneath, but I do ask the question, and I have my own skirting with this kind of thing in the past, and people ask why, and it's so bloody dark when you're down there. Mm-hmm. It's so dark, and there is no reasoning, there is no logic. For most people who come out the other end, it's not about why, it's about why not do it, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, it's terrifying, and it's really hard to explain to people if you haven't been in that darkness, because most people just kind of push it to the side and say, well, you just think positive and, go do something, go feed the whales or whatever it is, and you'll feel better. And it's not that simple. It's not that simple. I watch mental health on the Mighty. Their Facebook page has a lot of wonderful like little short videos about what not to say or what to say to somebody who has anxiety or somebody who's going through depression. And they do it on little Post-it notes, makes it very simple to watch. But when you look at that, you're like, wow, I don't think I really understood it. And I think that's the problem, is people don't understand what to do. And again, like with grief, they say all the wrong things. And that makes the depressed person, you know, feel much more isolated and withdrawn. So, you know, education is just a huge thing, and reaching out is so important.
I love your, on Grief Reiki, you have your postcards that, or, you know, the little sayings that go out. But did you not have a series of things not to say to people who are grieving?
Yes, and I'm starting those up again. I try to recycle them, but because I don't want to over inundate people. But yeah, there's so many things not to say, you know. I mean, and again, I don't think people do it intentionally. It's probably the same thing with people who are depressed. I don't think people intentionally or maliciously say things. Hopefully not. But it's just lack of education. And so, you know, saying the wrong things actually can do more harm than good. And I think this Friday, I have a tip, or sometime this week, I set up a tip for what to say. You know, can I give you a hug? You know, is there anything I can, you know, listen that you'd like to talk about? I mean, those are all important things to say, but all the wrong things don't work, definitely don't work, and can make it worse.
I was reading somewhere, because there's the classic, if there's anything I can do, you know, let me know, is, I mean, it's well-intentioned, but ultimately it turns out meaningless. But there's the people who look at the person and says, right, I'm going to do this, whether it's I'm going to turn up at 2 o'clock and I'm going to walk your dog, or I'm going to turn up with a casserole, or I'm going to, you know, drive you to the store, or, you know, do your grocery shopping. It's, find one thing that you can do and just do it for them, rather than, you know, asking them to let you know what they want, because they haven't got a bloody clue.
Exactly. And even if they do articulate it, most people don't follow through. And then it's another disappointment and grieving experience. Sheryl Sandberg in Option B, the book she wrote, she talks a lot about that, you know, like, stop saying you're going to do something, just go do it. You know, say, hey, I stopped at the grocery store. I'm going to drop some groceries off. I'm going to leave them on your front porch. You don't even have to open your door. You know, I'm going to just put them there. And I want you to know that, you know, that they're there so that you can bring them in. Or I stopped and picked up some dinner for you, and I'm just going to leave it at the front door, even if you don't want to, you know, those kind of things, because people don't take care of themselves when they're going through a tough time. You know, you kind of withdraw, you don't want to eat, you know, you can't even think about cleaning your house or washing dishes or buying food, going to the grocery store. And I think it's the same with anxiety and depression. You know, trying to get out sometimes is the issue, right? And being there and helping them. So those were some great ideas that Sheryl Sandberg has in her book.
Very cool. Okay, anything exciting happening with Grief Reiki? Well,
I have my Grief and Healing Corner every Tuesday. Tomorrow at 3, I'm interviewing another grief specialist. So I'm not sure what we'll talk about, but that's tomorrow at 3 Pacific time on my Grief Reiki Facebook page.
Very cool. All right. Sharon, as ever, thank you. We'll leave links to various groups down below. I'm super excited to check out the Mighty. We ran across them a couple of years ago when we were doing the legwork for the you know, Musicto Grieve 2 and the Grief Directory, and they seem like a very, very switched on organization.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, peoples, take care. We'll see you next week for another look on music and grief. All right. Thank you, Sharon.